Okay.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. It is 10:02 a.m. and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the SWAN quarterly meeting. My name is Ted Davis and I am the SWAN board president. We're glad to have you all here. We've got a kind of a full agenda, so we'll just go ahead and move right through it. Is there any public comment at this time? Okay. Is there anyone on the call who is a new library director, a proxy for their director, or a first-time visitor to quarterly? If you'd like to unmute and introduce yourselves and say hello.
Hi, my name is Kristen Lawson, and I'm the acting director of the Roselle Public Library, just temporarily while Samantha Johnson's on leave.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hey, Ted, I now realize what you meant, that the agenda has the user record purchase for ARPA, whereas I thought it was the other way because I wanted Diane and I to go before that. So you're welcome to kind of shift that, but Dawn, we would just need to adjust the slide order.
I believe we have ARPA before. Yeah.
So my apologies, everyone.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. I'll try not to say I told you so.
Yep, you can.
Next, we have the some SWAN election results to announce. So first of all, thank you to everybody who ran. 7 candidates is a lot. So that was exciting. I want to congratulate Tim Zemsky of Bloomingdale and Charity Gallardo of LaGrange. Their 3-year terms will be starting on July 1st. And thank you also to everyone else who ran. We hope you run again. And also a big thank you to Stacy Whitman and Julie Milovic, Stacy from Eisenhower and Julie from Downers Grove, for their years of service on the SWAN board. You will both definitely be missed, so thank you. All right, and then finally we have an action item to approve the March 4th, 2021 quarterly meeting minutes. Can I have a motion to approve those, please?
So moved.
And a second?
And I will second Kevin from the North Rural Library. Yep.
Thank you. And that motion was Julie Milovic from Downers Grove. Any questions or amendments to the minutes? Okay, we're going to do a reverse vote. Are there any objections to the minutes? There being none, we will consider those minutes approved. And I will pass it over to Aaron. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ted. And I want to thank everyone who's joining us today. I wanted to kick us off by talking a little bit about some opportunities here. And Diane Foote from ILA is also joining me with just talking about some of the funding that's available through the American Rescue Plan Act. So Diane, thank you for joining the meeting. I've been really keeping up with the ILA news on this, and you were really the one that kind of, within the newsletter, I think got me thinking more about there is some opportunity here for libraries, not just in SWAN, but in Illinois. And I thought, let's have you come and talk a little bit about that. I think the funding can be confusing, and I don't think that we have to have all the answers today, but I think we can just sort of lay out the way things are going with this. So let's move to the next slide here. And so I think one of the things that Diane, you had noted, at least ILA newsletter in March had said that, now is the time for library directors and municipal and district libraries to open conversations with your municipal colleagues to collaborate on access on these funds, focusing on areas of mutual interest such as broadband. And then you graciously sent me an ALA meeting to talk that was also discussing this, and they were also saying, play to your strengths, with this. If you have programs that have been successful and you think would be helpful in this, consider those. So let's have you kind of walk us through a little bit where things are at and how you see things.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Thanks so much, Erin and Ted, for having me here today. I'm actually really relieved to hear you explicitly state we don't have to have all the answers today, because I certainly do not. But I will say we are making efforts to keep abreast of everything that is happening with ARPA, and it is kind of unprecedented in its scope and just sheer size. It's $1.9 trillion. I actually write that out as 1.9 and then the word trillion, but I think it would be more graphic if we put all the zeros in. I mean, it's a huge number. And libraries have some explicit carve-outs in it, which is really fantastic. Libraries are also eligible for many other pieces of it, which is the more confusing part. Some of this is pretty straightforward. Some of it can be a little confusing, and a lot of it's a work in progress. So the slide that you're looking at now just lists some of the sources of funding that libraries are eligible for, or directly or indirectly. The DCEO, yeah, that's it. The image that is shown here is the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Development. We don't yet know if a DCEO is going to be involved with this or not, but it is a helpful graphic anyway. There is a page on the DCEO website that shows the contact person for each of those color-coded regions. So that's the person that that we all have access to in order to ask questions if and when DCEO gets involved in this. But before we jump right to DCEO, I just addressed that because the image is there and attractive. The pages that are in your packet that address this, well, Erin literally just grabbed that from the ILA webpage, which was hot off the press when you did that, Erin. It has already been updated twice since then, so that's a sign as to how rapidly this news is changing. We did put that link to that page out in the ILA alert. That'll be coming later today. But I don't think I have the ability to share a screen, but the URL is right there, so any of you can go look at it. And we just lists more details about all of the bulleted items that are here on this slide today. I'll start with the most straightforward one, but we don't know much about it yet. The funds that are coming through the Illinois State Library from IMLS, the total amount allocated to IMLS for this is $200 million. IMLS chose to put $178 million out to states, and the Illinois amount is $4,742,647. It's funny how they get very specific about the dollar amounts. But anyway, it's 4.7 million, which is fantastic for us. It's equivalent to a whole year of our regular allocation. Yeah, thank you, Erin, for advancing. Whoever did that, for advancing the slide a little bit. Oh, we're gonna put it. Oh, that's great. Thank you. That's so helpful.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you,
looking at it
Dawn.
on my screen, but then everyone else can kind of follow along. Oh, awesome. That's great. Thank you so much. It's so helpful. The Illinois State Library, along with all the other state library agencies in the other states, are working now with IMLS to come up with their terms and criteria and eligibility and guidelines for accessing those funds. We don't have that yet. So if you're feeling alarmed, like you ought to be applying for these things, it's not even out yet. So we can relax a little bit about that. There are some other sources of funding that libraries will be eligible for. The next one on the list is through NEA, and the state agency that will handle those dissemination of those funds in the state is the Illinois Arts Council Agency. The allocations have been announced, but like IMLS, we don't have, and like the state library, we don't yet have the terms and criteria and eligibility and guidelines on the state level yet. But that amount, as you see there, is $135 million. Of that, Illinois is getting almost $1 million for arts programming, and I imagine there are libraries around that have projects that would be eligible for this kind of funding, but we don't know what the guidelines are yet. The next one on the list is the NEH and the Illinois Humanities Council. Illinois Humanities Council is on it. They are the first one of these agencies to have put out complete set of guidelines. They are hosting a webinar like this one, but specifically about the ARPA funding that is coming up next week, Wednesday on June 9th at 1:00 p.m. There's a link there that you can go and see what they have put on their website and to register for that. And if you have, whether or not you have humanities programming, here's the beauty of this. Libraries are eligible. The Illinois Humanities has split these funds up into two pieces. One is just for general operating support. You can use it for whatever you want, and libraries are eligible for that. It's so easy. It's fantastic. It's free money. I hope everyone applies. The other piece of it is specifically for humanities-related programming, which many libraries may also have. So I've put up some very basic details about that here, but there's tons more information on the Illinois Humanities website itself. And that's another caveat I'd like to just point out. You know, ILA can provide this index, but I'm not going to recreate what's on all the individual agencies' websites wholesale on ours in case it changes or whatnot. It's really going to be important to go to those agencies' websites to make sure that you have the most current and complete details. But at least, hopefully, this index will help you know where to go. And I think, there's so many opportunities. I don't know that it's realistic for any one library to apply for all of them. But I mean, if it is, have at it. But you can pick and choose. You can see which ones fit your own needs and programs best. I mean, I'm assuming everybody will apply for what comes available through the state library. But thank you, Dawn, put it in the link in the chat as well. That's great. But anyway, this is an index. Please go to the individual agency pages for the complete scoop. The next one is kind of intriguing from the FCC. It's a huge amount of money. It's $7.17 billion. It is not getting parceled out to the states the way the other ones are. You will work, libraries and any other qualified agencies will work through organizations, will apply for this like E-rate. It is not coming through the E-rate program, but it is going to be administered like E-rate. So that is how the mechanics of how that will happen. We don't have, there's some information there, but we don't have, it's not open yet. The notice of funding opportunity isn't, very detailed yet. But at any rate, keep your eyes open for that. The states and local governments, that is the one that Aaron started talking about, the one that caught his eye several months ago. And it really, I was so happy that Aaron called me to inquire about this because I put out these ILA alerts and I don't know if anyone ever looks at them or reads them. So Aaron, thank you for, reading the ILA alert. That,
I read them.
But at any rate, the concept that Aaron mentioned a few minutes ago about libraries gathering your information and working with your municipalities is related to this. It's $350 billion. In Illinois, $8 billion is coming to us. Libraries are units of local government, whether you're, well, you're not your own unit of local government if you're a municipal one, but you are eligible for these funds. And this one is, I think, probably the most confusing of them all because it comes in so many different types and layers. So it's spelled out here though, because we did take some effort and time to analyze it and look at it and ask questions and whatnot. So large cities and counties are going to, or I guess any cities and counties are getting their own tranches of money, and you'll see the amounts there. I'm not going to read what's on the slide. And they will be able to apply directly to Treasury. Other quote unquote non-entitlement units of government, which are smaller ones, will need to apply to the state. Treasury doesn't want every single tiny municipality across the country reaching out to them directly. So they're going to put out a piece to each state, and then the smaller municipalities can apply through the state. So how can libraries work with their municipalities, or how can libraries take advantage of this fantastic opportunity? The original guidelines that came out from Treasury did say that special districts were quote unquote eligible for fund transfers. I saw someone else had read the ILA alert because they called up and said, what does eligible for fund transfers mean? And at that time, the answer was, I don't know. But just recently, on May 27th, the Treasury has put up an FAQ page which addresses that and spells it out. So what it means is that library districts, along with all the other types of special districts we have, don't have their own allocation direct from Treasury, but they are eligible to receive transfers from the state. So districts will be like the smaller municipalities. You'll be able to apply through the state, to the state, but not direct to Treasury, or through your county. And that's if you're a library district, or do what the municipal libraries will need to do, and that's work with your municipalities to collaborate on an application for these funds. Municipal libraries will need to work through their own corporate authority, corporate body to do that. So what that means is if you think you want to do this, I would start, and ALA has some great advice in their webinar, so I encourage you guys to watch that recording if you're interested in doing this. You know, it's the kind of stuff you likely do every year. If you do your annual report, or whenever you speak to your county people, or whenever you have an opportunity to talk about what you're doing in your library, what you talk about when you come to the library legislative meetups, when you have the opportunity to sit with your legislator and they say, hey, what's going on in you know, Bloomingdale, what's going on at Messenger, and you can do that. Put together the costs that you have, unusual costs that you may have borne because of the pandemic, PPE, plexiglass shields, reconfiguring your space, whatever it might be. I believe premium pay for employees is included in this. I mean, there's lots of opportunities here. What we don't know, what we do know is here. What we don't know is which state agency is going to be managing the rolling out of these funds. I imagine it will be DCEO, but we don't know. So we will need to wait to see which agency it is and what their guidelines are before I'm able to give you guys any more direction about you know, how to go about this. I will stop talking now. There's some other places to go for more information. National Special Districts Coalition was very active in making sure special districts would be able to access these funds. ALA's got a ton of resources on their page, which is linked higher up on this website. Does anyone have questions for me? You can either speak up or put them in the chat. While you guys are thinking, I'll just I'll note that it's kind of funny. I feel like ILA is like horse trading with SWAN a little bit. Tim, I see that you're here. Tim is just finishing up a role on the ILA board and is joining your board, and Julie is wrapping up a role on your board and joining ILA board. So I think it's great that we have this sort of I don't know, collaboration or sort of mixing of library leaders here in the state.
Yeah, the library directors in SWAN are fairly active throughout the state, so I think that's not a surprise to
not a surprise
here. Yeah, so I mean, you all are here. You can unmute yourself, ask questions. I know this is, you know, maybe a fire hose of information, but I certainly wanted to just make sure that everyone is aware of what is coming, that it's starting to take shape. I was more interested in what was shared, at least in some of the meetings I was attending, and I said this earlier, which is, you know, you should play to your strengths. And while it might seem a little odd for SWAN to sort of get involved in ARPA, what I did think about was the fact that what are some of SWAN's strengths, and some of it is around organizing within our membership, organizing within our libraries, providing opportunities to come together. So this is where I moved forward with, after talking with the board, about putting together some events. These start next week. So if you haven't looked at this yet, I organized those around the county regions, but maybe Diane, that was just an initial approach, was to think about as a way of organizing groups around counties seemed to be the right way to go, but we're still not sure. So I would just let anyone in attendance here, if there's a meeting to come together and talk about some ideas of what you might want out of your, to help with your community, pick any one of these meetings and we can come together. But I was trying to organize this around the idea that a large chunk of funding was going to come through the DCEO. And I'll just maybe tap a few folks. I mean, we were initially, when we were kind of talking about this, like Jennifer at Midlothian, I don't know if you're there and care to speak. We were initially kind of talking about some ideas that, you know, might potentially get funded, and we just need to figure out like which bucket might it come from.
I think Aaron's point is really well taken, and I love that you're having these brainstorming meetings. I think it's fantastic. I will look to see if there's anything else that that I have kicking around here that might be helpful in guiding you guys. But I think, Aaron, you've captured it, you know, in the intro copy that's a little bit higher up on this slide than the registration links. You spelled it out really clearly. One example, which I know is not in SWAN, but it's not too far away, is in Wilmington. You may have seen, it was featured in the ILA Reporter architecture issue, their building called The Drop. It's an external sort of auxiliary building that has lockers like Amazon sites where patrons can come and pick up books that they have on hold. There's a printing station, there's, and it's all, self-contained, and it was built for pandemic use, but it is obviously going to be helpful in other ways as well. And she did it with CARES Act funds, but she didn't do it with CARES Act funds through IMLS. That wasn't one of the uses that the IMLS funds could be for. She did it from other CARES Act distribution from her county, from Will County. So there's precedent for doing this, but you have to, I don't think the county is going to come to you and say, here's money. Like, you have to, work on reaching out to them. And I'm sure Maria Meacham, the director there, would be happy to talk to anybody about how she did it. She gave me a few details, but I think she worked very hard and advocated in a lot of different places to get access to these CARES Act funds.
Yeah, that what they created there with that physical structure, the drop was very interesting. And in fact, Maria joined us when we did a session on the use of library lockers within SWAN member libraries. So that was a really great example of kind of like rethinking of like a kind of a pandemic response to library services. So definitely we have libraries like Oak Park, Villa Park, Downers that have all like kind of thought more about the use of like kind of these physical upgrades or additions to their library service. So it will be great to just at least meet with directors or library staff next week to see, are there things that we can talk about that potentially we can at least organize, and then see if there's one idea around maybe laptop use as a way of like furthering kind of the broadband and filling in gaps in some of our communities where we need to get laptops out there, or like hotspots out there. And does that go through the FCC and things like that? We don't quite know, but I think it's good just to at least come together and kind of talk about what might be ideas that we can put together, and then see if we can apply. Well, I'm going to keep monitoring ILA's pages and all these departments, and attend some webinars to just sort of be able to help in with ILA, kind of just to help pass on the word, Diane. So I think
Sounds great.
You joining us today, I really appreciate it. And by all means, if there's other times you want to come and talk about some of the ILA initiatives or goals that you have, feel free to consider SWAN. There's a large group of libraries here that I think would love to see you attend our quarterly meetings with some regularity.
Well, thanks so much. It's good to, I can't see everybody wisely. I think folks have turned off their cameras, but it's good to quote unquote see you in the virtual space, everybody. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you. All right, I think we'll go back to our slideshow. So these are the meetings. There were two starting on Monday. Thank you, Dawn. And then we have 2 on Wednesday and Thursday. So I did note that there is a conflict with one of the meetings that Diane noted as far as the NEH info session. So I'm going to look at that. Maybe we'll be able to split up some folks to make sure that if we can have someone in SWAN attend the NEH session, I'd still like to have these region meetings as they are already scheduled. So let's move on. So I think we're ready to talk about user record purge. So Dawn Tortorella is going to really walk us through this, but you all probably have heard at some point or other as far as that we were looking to roll out our annual purge of inactive user records, which is something that we've done and in years past. And we want to make sure that we had some feedback from the membership, but we also wanted to lay out that we do have some different goals in mind for this. And we did talk about that with the SWAN board, and we've had user meetings to really gather input along the way. So this is a summation of what we've heard, what the steps are. So Dawn, are you there? Do you want to walk us through?
Sure. So we're looking to really just make this part of our ongoing record management process. And I should say that there is a very active part of our membership that is doing this automatically. They are reviewing records monthly and making sure that patrons that are no longer active in the library, that their records are no longer in the system. But we have other member libraries that really don't proactively do any of this record management. They may not have enough staff to do that. So we just have this disparity in how clean and kind of maintained our patron records are. And we want to get to a place where we have as much reliance on the accuracy of that information as we do in our bibliographic database. So we're also looking to, we heard from a few libraries that are really interested in doing more with geolocation coding, meaning that if they could track the longitude, latitude of active patrons, they would be able to target different services, different outreach activities. So that is a service that we can get through the National Change of Address updating process. So we wanted to look at that as enhancing the information and data we have to analyze down the road. So that has kind of become one of our target goals in this process as well. So when we initially looked at this back in April and pulled together what we thought would be guidelines to use, we looked at the analysis of user records in SWAN, and of the records that we would be eligible for removal was around 162,000 records. And that sounds like quite a lot, but you see where it's broken out into these various categories. I think when people got their reports, could go on to Blue Cloud Analytics and actually see how this impacted their library, we did start to hear concerns. So that's when we put a pause on the action plan, and we wanted to discuss it at quarterly, continue those discussions through the community forums. And so we've kind of adjusted things. And what we heard is really these three big points. Libraries want us to be more conservative in the selection criteria for removal of inactive patrons. They do want ongoing reports to assist in managing and updating those records. And there is a desire to move to an ongoing process so that this isn't something that every year we're kind of struggling with, and we have all of these different priorities and different desires across our membership. So moving in that direction, we kind of highlighted these were the primary feedback and areas of concern that were noted. We did a lot of testing, and when I say we, I mean all across the membership did a lot of testing in setting of last activity date. Exactly what sets that last activity for our patrons. And we found out that there were some gaps in that we want to address, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Universally, the inactivity period of a 3-year timeline, especially considering we've lost a year plus to the pandemic, and we had several libraries that had major building plans either before, during, or after the pandemic. So that kind of extended the window of potential patron inactivity. There were also concerns on our criteria of removal of bills. And we'll talk about the criteria. There was also a question on who is authorized to remove those bills that are long outstanding. And we discussed we really don't have a complete audit trail for bills that were migrated when we moved from III to Circe Dynex. So it would be very difficult for us to even be able to tell the patron what book they had checked out when and why it's lost. So kind of taking all of those considerations into our analysis, we've kind of come up with some ideas to share and get feedback on. One of the other challenges that we have that we really want to develop some better tools for our libraries is how do we handle juveniles that are aging to adulthood? We do have a legal opinion on our support site under the About, and there's a whole section on legal opinions. Juveniles are not responsible for prior bills, so their guardian was responsible for those bills. So that leaves a situation when someone turns legal age, and we also have legal age considerations that are different across the membership, but let's just use 18 as a measure. When a patron ages to 18, at that point, they really become the responsible party for their library usage. So at that point, libraries want a new renewal of that library card, maybe an issuing of a new library card, and getting their either signature or their agreement on file that they are now responsible for materials that they take out from the library. And then the fifth one is one that we know is not always top of mind for our membership, but it is certainly top of mind for SWAN staff, because as we read more and more about ransomware attacks and breaches in security, and we have to abide by new laws, including the student online privacy protection or all right, what is SOPA? I always get the acronym wrong. Stephen, bail me out here. The Student Online Personal Protection Act.
That's it.
Okay, thanks. That goes into effect July 1. And we do have students that we serve that have not had a legal guardian sign for a library card, and we also have students in our school district. So we have to abide by that law come July 1st. So all of these kind of privacy security issues are coming down as increased liability for SWAN, the organization. So we also want to make sure that we are not storing information on patrons that are long gone from our population base, because that is just an area of vulnerability. Every piece of data we maintain on an individual is a potential privacy and access point. All right, so we started outlining, hearing from everybody, how do we weigh these concerns and come up with a strategy that's going to get us into a good place eventually. So one of the things that we determined was last activity date. And we have some libraries that have expiration dates that are in the future. And we want to make sure that we are not removing any patron records that have an expiration date on their record that is in the future. So if you're not setting that, if you're using a never as your expiration date, we tend to rely on last activity date, but we'll also be looking at the expiration date of cards. Some of the services that we checked into that previously had been updating last activity date suddenly were not. So one of the things that we did in the past year is, as we tightened up our security and privacy with Open Athens settings, that also stopped the updating of the last activity date. But Robin has been working with EBSCO and with Open Athens, and one of the things that they are able to pull is any barcode just the barcode that has authenticated through Open Athens in the past year, we can capture that barcode and we can automatically make sure that that last activity date is updated. So we'll be making those updates to last activity date to bring them in line. And we'll see in a minute. We do have digital only users. It's not a huge percentage, but we certainly don't want to lose any of those users. The bill removal criteria was another point of concern. Some libraries wanted to opt out of having bills removed from those 10 plus years inactive patrons. And we want to provide the ability for a library to archive those records if they want to pursue collection of that. And there was also discussion of consideration of $100 versus a $200 threshold for that removal of bill criteria. And again, we're only looking at removing bills on patrons that have not been active in the past 10 years. So these are those archived bills that came over with migration. Again, last activity of 3 years is aggressive, so we're going to look at, let's start this year with a 10 plus years. If you haven't been active in 10 plus years, that user record is eligible for removal. And we would like to work towards a 5+ year removal by 2023. Again, giving us the ability to review patron records on an ongoing basis and renew those, update that last activity. One of the enhancements that we will be having this summer is going to Symphony 371. And one of the settings in 371 allows us to make sure that address changes that are made on the staff side do indeed update last activity date. So we'll have some additional tools within our workflows environment to make sure that last activity date is being updated. Okay, so that's just the broad outline of what we heard and how we can adjust the strategy to kind of keep all these concerns at top of mind when we start looking through this. The biggest one that we want to address immediately is updating of the last activity date, and we plan to do this this month. So we will capture all users that have been authenticated through Open Athens in the past year by barcode, and we will make sure that their last activity date is updated to reflect at the point in time when we run this update. So that's basically restarting them at the day we run this to that being the last activity date. We did run Robin captured the data for 3 of our libraries as an example. We just wanted to kind of gauge what is the scope of this last activity date not being updated. And we found in the 3 libraries, Carroll Stream, Thomas Ford, and Wooddale, there were 541 total patrons that had authenticated through Open Athens in the past year. And of those, 36 had a last activity date before June 30th. In other words, we saw that 36 of these people are pretty much digital only users. They're only using the databases, because if they had used any other library service, they would have had their last activity date reflected. Again, to assure people, when any resource is authenticated through SIP2, Overdrive, Hoopla, that last activity date is updated. So access to e-content not through Open Athens is being updated. And I can pause at any time if anybody wants to jump in with questions. If you want to put any questions in chat and you want to, comment, let us know, and I can definitely pause and turn over the mic to anybody that wants to add.
No questions in the chat yet so far.
Okay, so we decided let's just kind of rethink this, and let's start with consensus. And so we believe we have a consensus on removing bills for inactive accounts greater than 10 years. There's consideration of, is that threshold $100 or $200 of when we remove those bills? And you may be thinking, why would we remove bills? Well, the number one reason that we need to remove these bills is that we keep accumulating these records, never get removed in our annual process that we've done for the past 5, 6, however many years. If even a 1-cent bill remains on the patron record, that record cannot be removed. So we're looking at, how do we get rid of these inactive users? And we have to do this kind of in a big batch here. So we want to immediately remove those accounts. Because if you were to have one of these people come to your library, you would want to re-register them with a new signature and responsibility. In looking at this data, I would say that a good percentage of those inactive patrons for 10 years, they are juveniles. So we would not be able to collect on that money owed, even if we were to retain the account, have a discussion with the patron, and then have them sign a new signature responsibility. So this whole juvenile, aging situation has added a lot to this backlog of accounts. We also want to remove the remaining bad address records that are there from the 2018 National Change of Address. Libraries have had 2.5 years to contact and update those records. So at this point, any that remain have not been able to use library services. They're no longer part of the original library service area, so we would like to remove those as well. And then we want to remove inactive accounts greater than 10 years. Not everybody owes bills, right? There are some people out there that are just inactive. They have no bills, nothing, but we do have patron demographic and personal information on them that we would like to purge from the system. So this kind of brings up questions, that we have as we develop future-looking tools to enable libraries to be more proactive in following up on those lost materials, those bills that accrue because of lost material. The closer you are to contacting that patron at the point of billing, the better chance it's going to be to get that money back. So we want to just kind of know, how do libraries follow up on outstanding bills? And if there is no follow-up, is there a reason to keep these patrons in the system? If there's no active pursuance of those outstanding bills, is there a need to keep them? And if we allow a library to opt out of this removal process, when and how should we revisit that?
All right, we've had a couple comments, questions come in via chat.
Okay, let's look at those.
So Juanita is the first one, and I think Juanita has been a very good tester on behalf of their library and libraries as far as this. So the question is about digital only users. And I'll read this out loud for everyone. Dawn, you said that only digital only users were not showing activity on the SWAN records. Does this mean you've solved the issue where any changes we make to their records, expiration dates, phone, don't update the last activity date?
We have not yet, Juanita, but we will with the Symphony 371 upgrade in July. And that's why when we look at timeline, we're going to give libraries enough timeline and time to make sure that those records can get updated if you don't want to lose those patrons. But it is going to require some kind of action on the part of the library.
Okay, and the next question has come from Tiffany at Elmwood Park. So this is pertaining to some of the meetings that we've had. So there's been some folks have been really attending all of the kind of discussion meetings we've had. So at the earlier meetings you had on this topic, you mentioned libraries needing to test other products to see if they update the last activity date, which we're, just as a note, we're abbreviating this often now as LED, such as our computer management software or program registration software. I need to check to see if they go through SIP2, but if it does not have a SWAN recommendation on each individual library should do this, deadlines, and if the last activity date isn't updated through these processes, then what can a library do to update these on a monthly basis? I'm going to make one note here, and I'm thinking this is something, you know, SWAN staff present here also should think about. I think we tend to think of how all these services are connecting to SWAN, and we know that. I don't know if member libraries do it all, so I don't know if we have a comprehensive list that shows, you know, what the services that we know of, and if it's coming in via SIP2, and if it does the last activity date.
We do not have that right now. We are working on that. So we have started compiling that so that we have all that outlined. And I think, Tiffany, as we get a little further in kind of discussing this, I think we will address kind of timeline and tools for making sure that the last activity date is updated. I should also mention that many of these services that we use. Let me just give you a few examples. Event management software, like let's say a patron is registering for an event. If they register for the event, that is in things like Evanced and Communico, that is updating the last activity date. However, if it's an open event and you don't require registration, then even if they register with their name, but they haven't authenticated with their barcode, that's not updating. So we do know that there are patrons that attend events and are active in your library that may never check out material. So that's why those monthly list of patrons that you're going to review and act upon, if you know that that is a record that should be retained, will give you those tools. And Pat asked about university students. I probably should have mentioned at the top, our universities and our special libraries are not included in this because we know that you all manage your population based on enrolled students, and you know, if they need to keep the amount owed on their account for transcript purposes, and also the membership in our special libraries. So our academics and our special libraries are excluded from this process. And it should also be noted that our academics and our special library card holders, their cards are not eligible at public libraries. You know, so we're not really sharing the same pool of patron records. They're in the pool, but they are not eligible for reciprocal borrowing direct at a public library.
Hey, Don, I just want to mention really quickly, we do have a page on the support site. It's called Supported Third-Party Vendors. I included a link in the chat. And it's not comprehensive. It doesn't have every kind of individual thing that you might have in your library, but you know, if you're looking at like 3M Biblioteca for self-check AMH, you can see those are connected through SIP2, and you can get an idea of which ones are connected through Open Athens, and most of the ones that are web services. Like Dawn mentioned, we're going to be working on expanding this list, but if you just want an idea right now of what's Open Athens, what's web services, and SIP2, that should give you a good idea for right now.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, and Juanita did mention a concern, about patrons can sign a new agreement regarding being responsible with library materials, but if they weren't responsible before, they likely won't be now. And there's concern about issuing new cards to those patrons, and if we purge them, we have no way to track that. That is all very true, but it's also, we've heard the opposite argument from library directors who don't like their first patron encounter with someone who has moved into their district to be, oh, you were previously at XYZ library and you owe $26. You're not going to be able to get a library card with my library until you pay that $26. The reason being, it's if they were moving from out of state, to Illinois, if they were moving from a non-SWAN library, we would have no history of what they owed before. They would start with a clean slate. So in a way, this additional tracking of the patron information of inactive patrons is really coming back to again have information at our disposal that we would not have in other circumstances. And that always leads to the question of, are we retaining too much personal information in that regard? So just, both sides of that. Remember that no accounts will be removed that owe more than $200. So the real abusers, those patrons that have probably stolen library materials or gone to several libraries and taken materials, if the value is over $200, those patrons will be retained in the system. We may want to have a future discussion on how we secure their information a little bit more so that we have it to access, but it's not just part of the ongoing list of patrons that we review constantly. But those abusers will still be retained in the system. Okay, so if we look at going to the 10-year plus years inactive, we're really looking at 116, down from 162,000. So it gives you just the perspective of just how many users we have that are just in the database that haven't been to a SWAN library in 10 years. And I found this very interesting. If we project through if every month we extend that 10 years a month, obviously, if we go to 12/31/2011, we only get 89 more users. So the majority of these 10 years plus inactive are patrons that, long ago probably checked something out but haven't been to a library in 10 years. At least one of ours. They may have moved, as we see 62,000 have. Okay, so why record cleanup removal is necessary. And I found this on Google. I love Bloomingdale's sample card that's on Google for John Reed. So his card expired on September of 2012. We might still have him in our database if he owed $5 in overdue fines. And it's probably a good idea to get that record out of the system. Think of all the information we have in patron records: name, address, phone number, email, birth date. It is a treasure trove if you are trying to get information on people. So every piece of information we retain and every person we retain that information on increases our liability. There's also a question of efficiency and service. Inactive records come with processing overhead. They increase the likelihood of duplicates. And they tend to cause negative patron experiences at the service desk. And I think the number one thing we need to just kind of shift our way of thinking, and we live in a new world, obviously, and we need to look at protecting personal information is very critical to public service. That is part of public service. And we are recommending that one of the things to protect patron privacy is require that patrons have their library card or a scannable barcode. We have all kinds of services now that allow us to store our scannable barcode on our mobile devices. So either have the card or a scannable device for checkout and using self-check machines. That's just, again, it's protecting their personal information. It's not a barrier to service. It is critical piece of service. So how far do we kick this can down the road? We've been kicking it for 10 years. Or more. Actually, we have inactive patrons from 1999 on our system. So we want to remove inactive users in August of 2021 if they've been inactive for 10 plus years. We would like that monthly process to be modified in January of 2022 to look at a 7+ year window of inactivity, and then in 2023 to get us to a 5-year window of inactivity. And in talking to member libraries, it did seem like that 5-year threshold is a reasonable threshold to retain records on the system. Those are still patrons that you may want to be engaging with and bringing them back into the library. So 5 years, we agree, seems like a reasonable long-term goal. We initially had proposed that we would do weekly processing of inactive accounts, and we heard that constant weekly review, that might just be a little onerous for library staff. It would be easier, we heard, to have a monthly process where you get the reports, you can review who's going to expire the next month if you don't update that record, and then go to an ongoing process of just reviewing those records, making sure if you want to retain them, that you can update the record and retain them in the system. And once we get to that status quo of aging monthly, it's not going to be this horrific annual process that we've been going through for the last several years. And we really want to change the dynamic to being able to focus on proactive communication outreach and resolution of billing so that you can immediately reach out to those patrons and not allow this to, accumulate like we have in the past. So here's our timeline targets. We're looking at June and July, updating the last activity date, making sure that those concerns are addressed, removing those 10+ year bills that are, we recommend under $200, but we will work with a library if they feel that they don't want to remove maybe past 100. We can look at the differences in your data between those so that you can make that decision, and then allow libraries to review and update patron records. And then we can start the monthly reporting of records to remove in August, which would then say September is when we would start that removal process. And we're looking to October of this year get a national change of address on all remaining, and the geocode on patrons that were active in the last year. And then we're going to move to the 7-year inactive in 2022 and 5-year inactive 2023. And Jennifer's asking, past January 2023, is there any consideration of going finally to the original proposal of 3+ inactive removal criteria? That is certainly something I know we would like to see from a data storage liability standpoint, but we heard enough, I think, feedback from our member libraries that they weren't comfortable with that. But by January 2023, we might be. So it's certainly something we would like to revisit. And there's kind of our timeline of in a more visual, what our next steps are. So we're going to update those last activity dates, work on that in June. We're going to upgrade Symphony in July. So by July 31st, that will be updated. We'll give libraries a month to review those records and update them if necessary, which would update the last activity date at that point. And then we will pay those bills with SWAN Purge based on our criteria in July and August, and begin our monthly automatic removal. We would begin the reports in August, begin the automatic removal in September. Juanita, the new version of workflows will not go back and capture last activity date. So if you renewed a library card 6 months before the Symphony update, it is not going to. It's just moving forward. And that's why we're going to work with individual libraries to make sure in this time period, July and August, before we do any purging in September of those records, that we make sure that you're in a good place, that the eligible records to purge for your library you are comfortable with. So expect a lot of one-on-one consultation and review. We will probably have a lot of open office hours to get together online and to look at your individual reports and how it impacts you before we do these actions. All right, we're getting a lot of questions here. Okay, let's start with Mary. To confirm, it will be a monthly process starting in August with adjustments made to 7 and 5 years at time frame specified. Yes. So in 2021, we're going to be looking forward. We're going to be looking back 10 years. Inactive 10 years, those people are eligible for removal. January of 2022, we'll look back 7 years. So all of 2022, we will change that criteria that runs the reports and removes inactive patrons to 7 years, and then in 2023, move it to 5. Yes, and Jill asked for the monthly automatic review. You'll get a monthly report, and you'll have a month to review it. Yes, kind of like the timeline for long missing in transit list. Yes, we want to give libraries a month to review and do anything you want to do with those records before that automatic removal happens. Juanita asks, any idea how will we guarantee our active patrons won't be purged? No, we cannot make that guarantee. So I think all you can do is look at the list that will come out that capture the 10+ years. Remember, we're changing our criteria to inactive 10+ years. Review that list. If you're not comfortable with that list of users that are eligible for removal, then I would contact them. And you could then update their records if you want to keep them on the system. And Juanita, if you've got 1,500 plus patrons that are 10 years inactive, I would strongly suggest that those patrons haven't been to your library in 10 years or haven't used a service in 10 years. And I would think they should be removed, and from a liability standpoint, I would want them removed. Okay, if a patron is inactive but does log into their account, does that update last activity date? If they are inactive but log into their account, does that update last activity date?
I think we would need to know if that's logging into which account.
And yeah, and is it going through a mobile app? Is it going through Enterprise? What is updated, and I think Robin, you're on the line, so do jump in. We have a lot of concern about, I don't use physical books. I use all ebooks. So I'm using my Overdrive, my Baker and Taylor, all of those sources. And when I authenticate to get those materials to check them out, that is updating the last activity date. So even though we don't see the circulation information in Symphony workflows, it is updating. Robin, you want to jump in with anything?
Yes, Dawn, this is Robin. Thank you. Yeah, so all of the major vendors like Hoopla, Overdrive, all of that, they use SIP2, and they do have a code in there to update the last activity date.
Now, I think Tim followed up and asked if it's on Enterprise to look at an old circulation record. Now, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe if they just log into Enterprise, but don't place any holds, don't make any interactions with the account, that will not update the last activity date. And we can confirm that.
Right, yeah. And again, looking at 10 years and 3 years is also buying us the time to make sure that everything that all of the third parties we're working with are updating the last activity date. We did have a session with our Sure Sailing consultant from Cersei Dynex, and we have some code that we will share with our third parties that use web services like Communico and those services, so that every time we're going to ask them, every time that they access one of our patron records, that last activity date is updated. So we'll be working with them, and we feel that that gives us time with the going to the 10-year. So that's an ongoing process we want to make sure is working as we all expect it to.
So Yvonne had a good question. If you're using something like Communico or another service to register for library events, but you're not requiring the library card or any sort of authentication, that will not update the last activity date. It has to authenticate the library card with the barcode number, in some cases also potentially the PIN, but at least it has to have the barcode number on there.
Right. Yeah, thanks to Juanita for that detail. Juanita has been great in testing these third parties. So go to the forums and you'll see all the great testing that member libraries have done, and Juanita has a full list of things that have been tested and how that last activity date gets updated. So we appreciate that work. And that work is certainly informing, our decisions and kind of pulling back to that 10-year time frame, so we can guarantee as close as possible that we're not getting rid of active patrons. But another thing to think about, just being devil's advocate here, if the active patron has never updated their last activity date, that means they're not authenticating against services. So and do you have them in, how do you contact those members? You know, they're obviously not getting any notices from SWAN. So are you using their information to contact them in another way? I think those are all the questions we have. Like, what is the separation between how you engage with your patrons? How do you capture that information versus the transactional work that they do when they authenticate against SWAN? Okay, any other, you guys ready to go to a fun topic?
Yeah. Don, I know you've been talking quite a bit here, so I know you're filling in for Tara today, correct?
Yes, unless you want to.
I can do my best unless we wanted to switch and talk a little bit about the DEI initiative, and then we can circle back to this. I know everyone wants to hear about Aspen,
Yeah.
but I think this is a good opportunity. Dawn, you take a drink of water, and we'll talk about one of the more interesting initiatives that we have going on right now in terms of what is you know, I think coming up organically just through our membership is in just through a lot of thinking is the diversity, equity, inclusion in metadata. And let's just move on to this next slide here. So one of the first, you know, just some background here. There have been concerns about like Library of Congress headings and efforts to maybe update various Library of Congress headings just to maybe like look more towards inclusive language or updated language. And this is more to reflect, you know, how, you know, the catalog refers to groups of people that is more respectful, and we'll just say it's modern. And I first began hearing about some more recent activity in this area as far as with Library of Congress. This was coming up the ALA midwinter, and you know, there was a lot of concern about the fact that, you know, Library of Congress kind of headings are lagging, and there's a lot of maybe I would just say politics somewhat involved in this. And this is when other groups, shared catalogs, began to say, we're going to be looking at this independent, not necessarily waiting for Library of Congress to sort of play catch up and be at, you know, sort of at the mercy of maybe Congress making these changes to these terms. So again, this began with some requests from the membership and some other institutions, and then filtering in with some patron requests that have come to libraries. So we started this task force. This is being led by Scott Brandwine, our bibliographic services manager. And you know, we really wanted to just start by evaluating our catalog and making sure that we had, you know, at least a good group of library staff that are involved in the cataloging areas of the library. Scott can't be here today. There's a catalog users group meeting that is running in concurrently with this quarterly meeting. So there's 9 members in this group, and they're looking at, like, you know, like I said, terms that have become outdated or in fact, they're no longer useful in searching. It's possible that, you know, the lack of updated terms within our catalog may make searching for material, you know, less successful in the results that are returned. So our goal here is that we're just at the beginning stages of this, where we're just identifying the terms that are problematic, and the ultimate goal is that this is going to be updated automatically, where we'll have perhaps updates that occur in the evenings. This won't be something that catalogers will have to focus on as additional work that they have to pay attention to. This will be updating our MARC data automatically with background processes. And also we're looking at our MARchive vendor, which is a vendor we use to help with our authority updates, and to see if we can incorporate their services and make sure that we're not like undoing work that we do all along. And this is also going to help because there's libraries that are looking at improving the visibility of their DEI collections. And I think that, you know, it's certainly time, and it's something that we were excited to initiate and work on within the catalog. So we're only at this first bullet point of this list, but we wanted to let everyone know that this is something that we're looking at. Where I'd love to just say SWAN is taking the lead on this. We are taking the lead as far as, you know, within our group of libraries, but there are other consortia that are looking at this as well. So the CCS consortia, also in Illinois, is working on this. All their catalogers have come together, and they've also been examining everything that they can to, you know, follow, you know, the same kind of approach as far as making the subject headings more contemporary, more inclusive. So I think this is really exciting to see, and I'm really proud of Scott, you know, leading us through this. I hope you all feel like this is timely and appropriate to make sure that we get this done. So we'll continue to give you updates either at our monthly membership meetings. Those fireside meetings still continue, and we're happy to give you updates at the director level, at quarterly, about this. I'll just stop. If there's any questions about this, or anyone want to put anything in the chat, I'd be, you know, happy to attempt to answer them, or we can pass those on to Scott for later follow-up. Not seeing any questions. So let's circle back to Aspen. So the Aspen Discovery is part of a larger effort that we've been updating you on, and our libraries on monthly. And the Aspen Discovery platform is running in parallel to our enterprise catalog. So Aspen has certainly been something that has been a project that we've worked on throughout the pandemic, and the libraries that have been involved at the pilot level, there's seven of those, and we just want to kind of give everyone here an update where we're at in terms of Aspen. So Dawn, let's just sort of, maybe we can tag team this. I'll just note that as we've been building up the Aspen system to ingest records, electronic records, overdrive records, to ensure that all 100 library records or e-resources are included in here, we began to really push this system to the limit that we had at that time. So we had to regroup and look at performance and stability. So Dawn, I don't know if you want to mention some details here, what we were looking at, which is that, you know, rather than wait to get midway through a rollout with adding all this e-content metadata and run into issues, then we felt like it was better to do that before we really start looking at any libraries starting to transition over to Aspen. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, so we've gotten a lot of feedback, like when can we get Aspen? When are we, you know, moving past pilot? We have identified some major milestones that were required before we kind of gave it the green light to go ahead. And it was really not based on functionality. We've been extremely pleased, which we'll talk about the research report in just a bit. But one thing we wanted to really test is the stability and the scalability. So over the past couple months, we have actually added all of our 100 catalogs have been indexed. Robin has also made sure that all of the e-content is part of that. And as you know, it grows exponentially with every library that we add. The indexes get larger and larger. So during that process, we did run into some bottlenecks. Stephen and his team actually reconfigured, the physical requirements of both memory and storage and some of the configuration settings to enable us to be more efficient at running the Aspen catalogs. Bywater, the support and development vendor for Aspen, their team actually worked extensively with rewriting code based on what we were finding. And so they have been a great partner in addressing these problems. But if you had asked us 6 weeks ago, a month ago, where we felt, we were not as confident. But the past month, we have made a major performance improvement in Aspen. So we're really confident of all of that. Stephen, do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, just to chime in, I would just say that Bywater has been a really excellent partner, as you said, and we've spent a lot of time just looking at analytics of the server and watching performance. It boiled down to we found a lot of ways that we could improve the performance on the server by increasing the scale of it, and then also Bywater found ways that they could reduce redundancies. So not to get too technical, but it was kind of performing redundant queries each time you search for something. And that created more overhead for the server, which required more memory and more CPU. And so the combination of us increasing the scale of the server and them reducing those redundancies has gotten us to this kind of sweet spot where everything seems to be performing really well. We've also introduced new tools that'll be monitoring the server and sending us a lot of alerts and kind of all sorts of metrics all throughout the day. And we're playing around with those now. So as we roll these out to the membership and have more patrons on the system, we'll be able to actively see what the server is doing and be able to respond to things more quickly.
Yeah. So we didn't want you to think that the project's been stalled. It's been actually very, very active. It's just been kind of that whole infrastructure part that we've been spending a lot of time on. Tara did release a report on the Aspen Pilot Research Summary. The link is here. I think it's a 150-page report, but if you go through that report, I think you'll be impressed with the amount of input that the pilot libraries and the amount of work they've put in, as well as our UX team in leading these kind of research methods and studies to see how patrons react and how staff react to the interface. So there's a lot of usability testing that has been done. We've also done surveys and done an accessibility analysis, and we were able to turn that accessibility analysis over to Bywater, and they immediately implemented improvements to make sure that accessibility was matched. So again, all around that research summary report is going to show you the extent of the work and the positive feedback we've gotten from patrons and staff. Just a quick graphic, it's like, which catalog do you prefer? This was based on responses of an online survey posted on the beta catalog. So our 7 pilot libraries had a link, and it captured that 68 out of 114 responses, or 90 responses. So 68 and 22. So about 3/4 of the patrons preferred the beta catalog.
Just, I think this is clarifying maybe the obvious for everyone. When we were sharing this with the public, we were calling it a beta catalog.
Yeah. I'm going to just pop over here real quick so you guys can see all things Aspen, just so you know where to get that. Under documentation, we have an area research and pilot services, and right now Aspen is under there. So if we go over to Aspen Discovery, this is all of the information related to Aspen. And that research report is under here. And there's all of the various reports, but there's a full report as well. So if you want to find out anything about Aspen, it's all in there related to the report. And Tiffany, I think we will get to some of your questions. Yeah. This was survey feedback on the grouped formats. One of the things that I think library staff were most excited about was the grouped format, where you're going to see your large print, your ebooks all collapsed into a single record where you could see the formats easily. We were excited about that across the board. Our member libraries were excited, but we were concerned, what do patrons think when they encounter this? Does it throw them for a loop? And no, they had really positive responses to the group formats. So they could easily see what format was available for a particular title author. So they liked it. And here's one of the early problems we had. There's always those, titles that really create a grouped record kind of challenge. And A Star is Born was our number one thing. We kept saying, if we can solve A Star is Born, we're well on our way to figuring out group records. Prior to the fine tuning that really Scott worked with Bywater on looking at some of the bibliographic data points that were matching in order to group. They refined a lot of that so that they were looking not just at the title and the format, but they were also looking at publisher information, other things like that for movies and DVDs. So now we actually see 4 A Star is Born instead of 1 where they're all collapsed, and you might get Judy Garland instead of, who else is on here? Instead of Barbara Streisand, you might not get what you wanted at all. So group records are working really well. And this just illustrates the power of a grouped record. All of our go live development priorities that the pilot libraries identified, we're ready to go live when these milestones are met. They have all been implemented with one exception, and that's the ProPay integration. And that has not really been a delay on the SWAN or the Bywater part. It's actually, just getting ProPay to respond to our request to get that working. So we're hopeful that that's going to happen soon. I don't know, Aaron, if you want to make a comment on that.
It's my understanding we've seen some movement this week between Bywater and then the ProPay side. I think they just needed to get an agreement in place. I've not heard if that has happened, but I think that it is important just to note that, the online payment in Aspen with our ProPay is not complete yet. Once that gets rolling, we'll see. They may be able to develop fairly quickly. Bywater meaning may be able to develop fairly quickly with that system. But we are looking at these seven pilots there. They seem to be eager to get going, even maybe foregoing the payment integration within the catalog.
Right.
And Aaron, I've been tracking that agreement pretty closely, and there's actually a lot of activity today, and Bywater is working out the agreement actively with ProPay as we speak.
Very good.
Excellent. So rollout plans, our pilots can go live as early as July 7th with no online fines payment, or maybe with some, hopefully. And then after our pilots go live, we will begin to roll out the eligibility for other libraries to join 2 to 3 cohorts. We'll have about 8 weeks of training and preparation. All of the training will be recorded. We'll have both webinar formats. We'll have short tutorials. We have a lot of documentation already provided on how to do various functions. There will be 4 all-staff trainings and 5 admin trainings. And so we're looking at 3 cohorts right now: August to September, October, November, and January, February. But our goal is that all libraries will be using Aspen, by end of March, April of next year.
Couple questions to come in, Dawn. I just want you to get through some of the rollout plans here. So I think this is talking about staff roles, and this maybe dovetails into some questions that are coming in as far as there's new functionality, I would just say expanded functionality within this catalog that I think will be a delight for library staff, but you also need to start thinking about the fact that you're going to be using potentially using Aspen in a way that you had not prior with any of the other catalogs that we've had in SWAN prior. So you're going to need to start thinking about your staff and the roles they're going to play. So I don't know, Dawn, do you want to touch on these kind of 4 roles?
Well, the roles just give permission to update things. And I think Crystal's in the house. Crystal, you want to talk about some of the exciting things that, say, reference staff now have the ability with the OPAC Public and Text Services feature as an example. Is Crystal here?
Hey everyone. Yeah, I'm here. I've just muted in 2 places always. Hi everyone. Yeah, we have different staff rollouts. We have different staff admin features. So depending on how you're logging in, you'll be able to do a few cool things. You'll be able to do things like create what they're called like browse categories and different lists to help give your patrons some additional resources to look at in terms of like what they should read next. So that's, offering some excellent reader's advisory right there by just doing basic like subject searches. And if you're going to be one of those people who will be adding these, they're super easy to use. We'll obviously go through them in all of our admin trainings, but we'll also be able to show how you'll be able to help assist patrons place holds right in the OPAC, and without having, we've done usability tests and just desk observations of seeing how there's a lot of back and forth, having to go through enterprise first, then workflows. But being able to help somebody right there with the OPAC, seeing everything that they see. And yeah, I think that this, once you get around and get to see it and get to play with it, you're logging in, you'll be able to have a better perspective of how well this is going to work and assist your day-to-day interactions with your patrons.
Yeah, so some of like the public and text services, like being able to do carousels of, highlighting resources for, every month has another kind of focus. You can create those in advance and highlight those on your website as a carousel. Those are some of the new features that are going to be available. For the cataloging permissions, those will only be available for our cataloging libraries, but they'll be able to do things like change covers on items that are new that may have a wrong item in the Syndetics data resource, and they'll also be able to group records. So they can ungroup and group records based on what's appropriate. And then administrators will be able to put on your own banners and pages, update hours, logos, color scheme, themes, things like that. So that's what the admin training's about and why it's focused at these different job roles. One of the exciting things for reference and ILL staff is that they'll have a built-in materials request module. So if you want to allow patrons to request for purchase a title, that's built in as well. So yeah, lots of cool things. All right, I'm going to go back to these questions. So
Yeah, thanks.
Jennifer asked, how will we determine who's in what cohort? We're going, our plan is that those will be self-selected cohorts, and we don't want to force libraries to be in any cohort. We know that August to September might not be a good time frame for some, and it might be a great time frame for others. Since we basically have your indexes and your sites already built, we don't need to do a whole lot of upfront work to have you be part of a cohort. So it's really going to be pretty much library determined which cohort you belong in. And I think, okay, let's do Juanita's question next. Will patrons have a choice of catalog for a while once we go live with Aspen? Yes, they'll have a choice until Enterprise is no longer available, assuming that the Aspen, this next year of working with Aspen, assume it continues smoothly and we all prefer this catalog, then in May of 2022, we would be able to remove Enterprise from our contract. Until that time, we'll be able to use both. Let me head back up to, I'm working in reverse, so I know there were some marketing questions we'll get to in just a second. So Tim asked, will patron circulation record move over to Aspen? I am happy to report that yes, it will if the patron wants it to. We have worked with them to look at our charge history rule in Symphony. And if the patron has the charge history rule turned on currently, meaning that they turned it on in Enterprise and their history is retained, then the first time that you turn it on in Aspen, it will make the call to our Symphony database and import that history. So we're really excited about that. And okay, Tiffany asked, yes, there'll be all kinds of training videos, documentation, promotional material. We are working on some of that. And the pilots have done some like social media posts and links to their beta catalog within their website. We are open to what you all need. Our goal is to not print anything, but to provide you with the digital assets you need to incorporate into social media or print resources, whatever you want to do. And we will certainly help you with embedding the Aspen search versus an enterprise search within your library website. Okay, did I miss any questions?
No, I think you have. I think the only thing we may want to clarify, Dawn, and we're not going to cap these cohorts, are we? We're just looking at dates that work for these libraries.
Correct. We do not intend to cap the cohort. I will say though, if we have 80 libraries that want to get in the August to September, it's going to be hard to support all those individual questions. So we're hoping that, you know, kind of people self-select and there's a little bit of balancing, but we are certainly ready to have these cohorts not be exactly even. We want libraries to self-select, but if we get overwhelmed, we may have to do some adjusting.
Well, that brings us to the end here. I think that there's been a lot of great questions coming in the chat. I would also ask Ted, if you're still there, Ted, like we can ask anyone to unmute themselves and maybe make some announcements. I'm going to turn my camera back on. And Dawn, maybe we just turn off the slide deck.
Yeah, hey Aaron, I'm here. So we're at that point in the meeting where if anyone has any announcements or any final follow-up questions to anything from the meeting, we'd be happy to hear them. You can just unmute yourself and have at it. No?
Not seeing any.
All right. Then our next quarterly meeting will be September 2nd, 2021. Whether or not that will be in person or virtual will depend on the governor's proclamation, but we'll keep you posted on that. If there's nothing else, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 11:41 a.m. And I thank you all very much for coming. Have a great weekend.